Hello, I'm Brenda Valentine of Brenda's Heartmender Show. In years past, I hosted a television program titled On Call. Although the content is a bit grainy, these shows are still really relevant. Let's take a look. Welcome to On Call. With me in the studio is Pastor Gil DeLeo. Thank you for joining us.
Brenda, glad to be here with you.
I know that it was challenging to get here.
Tonight it was, yeah. We had some switches in vehicles, but we made it.
You know, On Call is about people who are literally on call. And as a pastor, there's many things that day or night people can call you because they need help, correct?
That's correct.
I want to ask you, before we go into too far on the role of a pastor, basically how you became one.
Well, Brenda, I came to know the Lord when I was 21. I began to go to church, spent a lot of time there, and in time we just felt the call of the Lord to come to Northern California. I didn't know the real reason for it, but later on it became apparent as we came up here and became very involved in ministry, and as the Lord just began to show in the direction that it would be pastoring. And so now it's been 23 years since we actually started and founded our fellowship right in our own front room.
Wow. Well, you went from in your front room to now you're having a congregation that has grown to you're having several services.
Correct. And right now we're in the process of starting an addition project to the children's ministry because we've got so many kids there also.
Well, that's really a blessing. You know, people sometimes are afraid of thinking about religion or church, and yet you weren't always religious. And I don't even want to say religious because I don't know that that's the case. You're a pastor, and there's a difference between being a pastor and being one that's religious.
Correct.
But before you had a call on your life, let's back up to your youth. And could you share with me your story?
Well, I was pretty involved in Southern California. I grew up and born and raised in LA, and I was very involved in gangs at the time that I made a decision to come to the Lord. I had an older sister who was trying to get me to come to church. She knew my lifestyle, my activities. I did all that I could to resist that because, again, I knew that I was going to be cross-grained to the life that I was living. So I did finally come and I made that decision, but it was a life of, again, a lot of trouble. I was heading in the wrong direction, doing a lot of things I wasn't supposed to be doing. So at this point, I'm really thankful for the change that happened in my life.
So you have a contrast. You understand one lifestyle. You mentioned being in a gang.
Correct.
What does that look like?
Well, you know, for me, I came from a broken home, and a lot of people come from broken homes. My father took me, my mom took my sisters. As I grew up, I lived in foster care for most of my life. My father remarried, then I got back into that family environment, but really never felt like I belonged. So gangs really became a family experience for me. There was a brotherhood, a fellowship in the gangs that I grew up in. It was what was called a barrio, a neighborhood, an established territory, if you will. And that was our domain. That's where we lived. That's where we did what we did in that area. And so for me, gangs became really a family experience. A lot of people thought it was just kind of a fad that a lot of people go through, but the reality is it's actually a lifestyle. It's a culture. It has its own dress. It has its own language. It has its own mindset, its own values, its own purpose. Granted, none of them are productive and healthy to the individuals in it, but when you're in it, you just live by that lifestyle.
How do you get into a gang?
You know, as a youth, you start growing up and you start hanging around. After a while, in a lot of gangs that I was involved with, you had the junior group and you had the senior group. You had the youngsters that had the gang name, the affiliation, and the involvement. But when you wanted to get serious, then you would move up into the higher ranks. And oftentimes that involved a good jumping in where you had to defend yourself against anywhere from 6 to 20 guys who all at once would be released on you to beat you up as good as possible to show whether or not you had backbone to stick it out in a tough situation, or if you're going to cry or run or chicken out. So that was normally the introduction to gangs. That's how we introduced different guys into the neighborhood.
And you're no offense, but you're a small stature.
Correct.
So to be beat up.
Well, you know, stature in gangs, it's good to be a big, strong guy. There's a an asset right there. But it's about the heart. I think looking back, you had to have a heart. You had to be willing to live or die for your neighborhood in the day that I lived in it. And so when you were young and you could take that, you earned honor and you earned respect from your peers. And they knew you weren't a big guy, but then again, you would never run from a situation. And so you had to have that credibility.
You weren't a wimp.
I just wasn't, like I said, a big tough guy, but I put myself in a lot of situations and I fought a lot of guys bigger than me, not to win the fight, but just to develop the honor. You had to have honor even amongst your enemies. They had to know that you were a person who would be there till the end.
We had a guest earlier, a district attorney, and we were talking about the lifestyle of someone who goes into a gang, and usually they don't end up with yachts and fame and fortune. They usually end up in prison or dead.
Correct.
And so for your lifestyle to get free from a gang, how do people usually get out of gangs once they get in?
Well, in some environments, when you get out of a gang, if you move away and you get out of there, you're not touchable any longer, and most people don't go looking for you. There were some gangs down in Southern California. In order to get out, they would eliminate you. They would literally kill you if they found you. They were that serious about keeping you into the gang. If you got involved in the prison gangs, that was more of a step up. And you're talking about making a total life commitment to this. So it varied depending upon the type of gang and how really rowdy they really were, how tough they really were.
My purpose is not to honor the gangs, but to educate people, because I've noticed in Red Bluff and other areas up here, I just recently got back from Southern California last weekend, and the graffiti and the signs and the people out on the streets, you could tell that it was a dangerous place. And many people talk to me about not going out. Brenda, be aware, don't take off at night, and don't go out.
Right.
Here we are in Red Bluff and Redding and, the northern state,
right,
part of the state, and yet I'm seeing a lot of signs of graffiti and different things. Could you explain what that means?
Graffiti in my day, some kids call it tagging, which is more of an East Coast originated artwork. You'll see this really fancy work on a boxcar. I watch boxcars go by and there's not a one that's not tagged. But gang graffiti is affiliation with a gang. For us, it was territory. You would have the different individuals in the gang whose names would be on there. And then you would finish it off with normally your gang affiliation, which you were involved with. So you see a lot of norteño, sureño, which is Northern California, Southern California mindset. In the day that I was in gangs, that wasn't quite as prevalent, only in prison, because once you went to prison, there was that breaking up of the state. But in my day, it was territorial, just as you would drive into the city of Redding and you'd go and there'd be the sign Redding right there. You would drive into our neighborhood and all of a sudden you'd see our gang name everywhere all over, and you thought, okay, I'm into another gang's territory. And so that's normally what that would identify, both the individuals and the territory.
So is that a cultural thing then?
That was just part of the culture of it. Graffitiing, writing your name everywhere you went, putting it, whether you're in your neighborhood or somebody else's, you would cross out rival gangs and put insults there too, just to show them that you disrespected them. And
so it's about honor. You mentioned the word honor and respect and disrespect. That's a huge thing in the gang mentality.
Correct.
That's a contrast in the sense of what others may think respect and honor is.
Correct.
For law-abiding citizens,
correct,
for example. Do I understand that to be able to get respect when you're in a gang is to do really bad things?
That's the tragedy of all the gang lifestyle. When the guys are trying to find an identity, whether it's family, whether it's in their social groups, are trying to find an identity, and so they get recruited into the gang. And so as you come into the gang, normally you would be required to do certain things depending on who you were to show whether or not you would be respected by your peers, you could be trusted. And unfortunately, it just revolves around more and more crime. And that's the sad part, because it's just leading you down the road to trouble and eventually prison. And most of us know most of the guys that go into prison get institutionalized and they stay in that revolving door. They don't know how to function any longer outside. They don't have any job skills. They don't have any relational skills. All they know is the gang, the neighborhood, the lifestyle. And so all they're doing is committing crime after crime after crime. So it's just unfortunately a tragic lifestyle that for myself I was able to get out of.
Gil, we were talking about a very serious issue. in the sense of respect and honor, and the difference between a mindset of that respect being, I have to be the worst of worst or the baddest of bad.
Right.
Or the other, on the other extreme, it's almost like light and darkness in a way, where, if I have integrity and character, then people will respect my word.
Correct.
And you can trust me. You were not there at one point, and then there was a switch in your life. Share that with me, that switch.
Well, again, as I shared earlier, when my sister invited me to come out to hear a concert, I came out to that concert, and I was trying to do everything I could not to arrive there. And the guy shared the Lord Jesus, and it was a changing moment for me. It was a place of decision. I remember going home and telling myself, what have you done? Your lifestyle, the direction you're living in. I've always learned that, you have to be serious with God. And I realized I wanted to be serious about this, and I knew there was going to be a change in my life. So there was. And I started making a lot of changes and seeing things in quite a different light as the Lord just began through His Word revealing those things to my life.
So at one point you were almost, if I understand right from earlier conversation, that in a gang, sometimes gang members kill others.
Sure. And that is part of the culture, tragically, it's all revolves around the neighborhood and the allegiance to that neighborhood and the depth of your commitment, what you're willing to do. And as I said, you have to live and die for the neighborhood. Been involved in shootout. I've been shot in 1977. I was involved in a gangland situation. I was shot. I ended up in LA County Hospital. They wanted to do exploratory surgery. I was 18 at that time. I didn't like the sound of that word exploratory. They said all the bullets had gone through, but we need to see the damage. And I opted out, so I just walked down to the lobby and gave him my $20 to the taxi guy and took a taxi back home, believe it or not, with just a little bit of topical antiseptic. And
how many times were you shot?
5 times.
Oh, gosh.
And that in itself is a miracle.
Yeah.
I look back and it was kind of God's calling card on my life. I could have easily died, should have died that night. I remember leaving Queen of the Valley Hospital, heading to LA County Hospital in the back of the ambulance. And they used to be like a station wagon in those days. And watching my partners looking at me, and it really felt like a hearse. I felt like I was in the back of a hearse on that gurney. And I wondered, would I return? Mm-hmm. There is that in that lifestyle, and a lot of guys don't have the opportunity to get away from it like I did. Again, we talk about allegiance. It's a level of commitment, and unfortunately, it's a misdirected commitment. The good part for me is having been involved in gangs and the allegiance that I had to my neighborhood, willing to live and die for it. When I gave my life to the Lord, it's that same mindset. I tell people sometimes being a part of Christianity and serving Jesus, you're involved in a gang. The difference is our core values in the gang. We're here for love and life. Those were there for death and fighting, and the end result is completely different. So for me to have to live and die for Jesus is no big deal. I've done that before in another life.
Wow.
Now I do it with a great and eternal reward, and so it's quite a pleasure to do that.
And sharing with others the ability. We live in a very hopeless world right now.
Yes.
And there's a lot of tragedy, there's a lot of loss, there's a lot of grief. And as a pastor, instead of causing death, you're there comforting people at a funeral.
Correct.
And at the times when they're facing death.
Correct. And that is a big part of our ministry, is to bring them hope, is to bring the gospel of Jesus Christ, what God has done for them and the life they can have. It's ministering to them in the day by day. And you mentioned a big thing, funerals. Early on in the ministry, I didn't like funerals. I didn't like them because they were sorrowful, they were sad, they were depressing, they were discouraging. You couldn't just say something to somebody and cheer them all up and everybody went home happy. But the Lord again showed me in that the ministry that goes on there, the presence, the care, the interaction, trying to give people hope. Maybe not a hope they would feel today, but one that they could pick up on a day or two down the road or a couple of weeks. That is a ministry. I think people in our society today, as they look at the whole world, they look at the United States of America, they look at the state of California, they're wanting to know, when's this all going to end? Where are we going to end up? We've got, I know in Tama County, over 40% unemployment. The state is struggling with the budget, the national deficit. We hear all these things, international issues. And that's what my ministry is about, is bringing hope to the lives of people, both on a day-by-day basis and with an eternal hope for them.
That's right. And, there's the fires in California, the drought in California. There's a whole lot of things that cause people to feel hopeless.
Sure.
And yet the purpose of On Call is to remind people that we're not alone. That there's people out there on call, you being one of them, therapists being another. There's a variety of different people that are on call to help people, not just on the show On Call, but out there. And yet many times through fear, we don't feel like we belong, so we want to withdraw. And in the gang-related things that we were talking about, the reason we brought that up was because you were involved in gangs at one point. But we want to belong, and yet we're afraid to belong,
Right.
And yet coming up to knocking on your neighbor's door might be the most scariest thing that you ever do. And they feel the same way.
Correct.
So how to reach out to others and share with them hope. You had mentioned funerals a moment ago, too. Coming back to that for just a moment. Say there's someone who's, been out there in the gang world or the Hells Angels or different people who you're just like, it's like, oh, there's no hope for them at all. And yet, you were sharing earlier about the fact of preparing a man who had cancer.
Correct.
Do you want to share that?
Yeah, it was just a couple of weeks ago, a gal in the body, her husband was dying of a very severe cancer that had eaten away a good portion of his face. He was riding with the Hells Angels years ago, and I told her, it was terminal, he was going to die, and I'd like to talk to them. And I went and I talked about eternal things. I talked straight up. I said, you don't know me from Adam. I said, but I want to talk to you. You're on the brink of eternity, and let's talk about what's going to happen. I said, your wife has asked me to do your memorial service, but I want to know where your eternity is going to be, and I want to talk about serious things. And I talked about my life. I had just given my testimony because it was 30 years to the day, July 29th, that I was a Christian. I had committed my life on a Sunday night, but it was a Wednesday night study, so I had never given my testimony before. So I did that to the body in the church, and I shared that. And the next day I had a chance to let them know that, I had lived a life of crime and done things wrong, and I knew your lifestyle, but God can forgive. I reminded him of the story of the thief on the cross, who, as he was judged by society for his crimes, he was dying there. Jesus was judged for nothing wrong that he ever did. He was righteous and sinless, and he asked Jesus if Jesus would remember him in his kingdom, which is a way of acknowledging the lordship of Jesus and his own guilt, because we read in the Bible, he confessed his guilt, and Jesus said, this day you would be with me in paradise. He gave him the hope that, you're acknowledging, you're confessing it, you recognize my lordship. This very day, when your body expires, your spirit will be with me.
It's not too late. It's not too late, even though you might have blown it all your life. It's not too late.
Until you're a flatliner, there's always hope. And that's what I did. The wife called me back, or actually left a message at the church the next night. He died.
Wow.
So we barely got there and shared those things. He wasn't able to communicate because the cancer had eaten away all his tongue muscles, and his tongue was hanging out of his mouth. But I just looked him straight in the eye, and I said, I don't know you. I love you, man, and I want to see an eternity. And I said, all you have to do is be honest in your heart. I'm going to pray a prayer. He did. When he opened his eyes, you could tell the tears were in his eyes. It was real. And I talked to him for a while longer. He was very uncomfortable. He was gaunt, weak, hadn't eaten in weeks. And so his body was ready to expire, and it sure did the next day.
The wonderful thing about being on call as a pastor, we think about in the community, we forget. Well, we need things, and sometimes they're very serious things. We need somebody to put groceries in the grocery store. Yeah. We need somebody to be working in the post office. We need people that are picking up the garbage. We need therapists. Yeah. We need counselors. Mm-hmm. We need pastors. We need morticians. We need each other in a lot of ways. And yet here you are able to give hope to their family, yes. As well. As we all are grieving the loss of some sort in life, whether it be loss of your job, loss of your identity, loss of a loved one, all different types of things. So to have someone that comes along with the breath of fresh air, and it's like, we're here. It's a great day to be alive.
Yeah.
And by the way, would you like to visit? Knock it back to visiting your neighbors, because we're here and we can make a difference.
You bet.
And that's one of the reasons why I asked you to come on the show. We have a variety of guests, from doctors and lawyers and Indian chiefs, so to speak, and yet to know that we're all here so that we can share the truth, which is love.
You bet.
Loving and reaching out to people. And that's a foreign concept.
True.
I mean, it's almost getting to be a foreign concept because it's about, sometimes it's like just getting the stuff. I just need to get more stuff, and maybe that'll make me happy, or maybe self-medicating, maybe that'll make me happy. But you walk through that lifestyle of trying to get the stuff, and being having allegiance and getting a family, because you didn't have a family in the way that you wanted. And in our world right now, the families are being shredded.
Truly.
And yet you're reaching out and being on call to help families.
You bet. And what's exciting about this is here's that lifestyle that I live, and I was sharing with you before. My younger brother is a detective sergeant with LA County Sheriff's Office, and so he just went to another division because he's detective work, but he used to patrol the old area. I was a gang member, and last year we did a ride-along together. After I got done with the pastor's conference, I went to go see him, and so he always razzes me that he got put there to take care of all the mess that I created, and I always joke all I created was job security for him. But to see the change, at least for my life and my testimony, now I'm a Tehama County chaplain with the Tehama County Sheriff's Office. I'm very involved with law enforcement ministry to them there. I'm an advisory pastor of Tehama County Christian Peace Officers Association, and was there kind of on the ground floor of developing that. So my ministry isn't just to the church-going people, but it is to the gang members. I've been asked to do, we had a gang member killed just last year in the community, and they asked me if I would do the service for him. And I did that and ministered to his family. And now I'm also ministering to the other end, law enforcement community. And so it's a really broad scope of opportunity for myself. I've had experience, I guess, now in the several areas, the criminal, the average citizen, and then those that are on the street trying to keep it safe for the rest of us. So it's just a great opportunity. I think the important thing is, love is a servanthood attitude. Love is more than just a kind word. It's the actions that go along with it. The Bible said, let's not love in tongue and in word, but in deed and in truth. And so it's going to take sacrifice. It's going to take servanthood. It's going to take time and giving to really do that, as opposed to living the selfish lifestyle of, this is me, this is who I am, this is what I want to get, this is where I'm going, get out of my way and let me accomplish what I want. So it's a completely different mindset.
When you were talking about love and being on call, at times on Sunday morning, do you feel like going to church?
And that's it. I'm glad you asked that question, because people probably think every Sunday morning we jump up and just rush down there. There's a verse in the Bible where Paul the Apostle, an aged leader, told a young pastor named Timothy, be in season, out of season. And there's a lot of Sunday mornings I wake up and I'm out of season. I'm tired from the week. It's been busy. It's been demanding. It's going to be a long Sunday. And I'd like to be out doing a whole lot of other things like a lot of people get to.
Yeah.
But I have a responsibility to be there every Sunday. We have at least 2 services in the morning, sometimes another one at night. And so it's a discipline of the mind and the attitude, And I'm focusing again why I'm there. I'm there because God has called me to serve Him. To serve the people, and it's just I have to get the focus again off of me, my needs, my wants, and remember I'm there. And you know what? Once you get there and you start doing what you're supposed to do, like I tell the people, Sunday morning's the cream on the cake. It's the counseling during the week and the crisis situations. That's where the real demand comes out of our life. And as a counselor, that spending time with people that are broken and struggling and all that, Sunday morning is just getting together with all the family, seeing people you don't normally get to see during the week and having that great time together.
One of the things that I realized in my life, and this is just a really personal moment that I'm going to share with you, about singing. And I don't know how many people sing anymore. You know how in the olden days, or even in school when we were little, we had songs we would sing at school, right?
Yes.
And I realized that there's something missing. That's almost to the point where it's like I wonder, it's like, do I even know any songs?
Yeah.
And yet that brings you so much joy in your heart, a levity, to be able to lift up your voice and sing. And I know on Sunday mornings, a lot of people go to a lot of different churches and they sing. But what about the rest of the week, to be able to sing even if it's scary out there and maybe I don't feel like it, And yet if someone can experience that not only will they exercise their voice and
Sure.
and maybe, like when you hear birds singing in the morning, what a blessing that is.
Truly.
I was surprised to know birds sing at night.
They do, yeah. Them little catbirds, they'll keep you up at night.
But in the reality of just finding things as simple as singing, because we think, well, I don't have any money, maybe my job, the worries of the world. What are the things that we can do that doesn't cost money? Knocking on your neighbor's door, inviting somebody to go for a walk with you, or singing a song.
And isn't singing, that kind of, that pouring out of the song of satisfaction, jubilation, celebration, a sense of hope. When you feel hopeless, you don't have a song. There's no reason to sing. The world gets dark. There's no answer. But when there's joy, songs come out. And I think that's the beauty of singing.
That's right. Well, we're going to have to take a break in just a moment, so maybe we can be thinking about a new song that we can share. We'll be right back. Gil, it's been such a pleasure having you here with us, and you have shared so much that was very enlightening. And so I want to say thank you again for joining us and being willing to share your heart and being willing to share your love with others and letting them know about the truth.
Thank you, Brenda. Hope it brings hope to people.
Brenda's books are available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. To download her shows, books in print or in audio format, you can reach her at BallentineHeartmender.com. If you would like Brenda to address your questions on her show or inquire about coaching and or speaking to your group, again, that's BallentineHeartmender.com.
Be sure to subscribe. I hope this was helpful. Until next time, bye-bye.